on Canada's electric vehicle sector. I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and the members. Please wait while I recognize you before speaking. For those on the Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And with that, I would like to welcome our witnesses for the first panel. Today, we are joined by Professor Julian Karajesian, visiting lecturer, Department of Economics from McGill University. We are also joined by video conference by Dr. Karim Zaghib, professor at Concordia University and Chief Executive Officer, Volt H. And our third witness for this panel is Dr. Nadja Johnson-Bresson, Associate Dean, School of Trades from Niagara College of Applied Arts and Technology. All the witnesses will have 5 minutes for their opening remarks, but I understand that Dr. Karim Zaghib would not make any opening remarks. So we will start with Professor Karajesian. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Okay. Start now?
Yes, please go
ahead.
Thank
you, Chair. Members of the committee, thank you for having me here. This is my second time testifying before House of Commons Committee on this issue. It's really a great honor. I just want to say that I'm coming here in my capacity or from my experience, more than 25 years with the Federal Ministry of Finance in the International Trade and Finance branch. I also do teach at McGill currently, and I have my own advisory firm. I come here, I represent no private interests, no any kind of interest. I'm affiliated with no party. My interest, after having been invited here, is Canada's prosperity, long-term, Canada's sovereignty. So I'll just make 5 or 6 points about that in the context of the government's agreement with the People's Republic of China to import, in the first instance, for the next 3 years, 49,000 electric vehicles. I just want to say my first point is that this agreement, this tariff relief agreement for EVs, for canola and other foodstuffs, where we have very substantial tariff relief on both sides. This must be seen, I think, in the context of a larger trade agreement that's going to benefit both countries. I actually think this will benefit Canada more. China represents more of our trade than Canada does of Chinese trade. They have a much more diversified export base than we do, so that's one point. The general point here is that tariff relief agreements, trade agreements, and strategic partnerships require a quid pro quo and should allow countries to play to their comparative advantage. Our comparative advantage, whether we like it or not, is in energy and agri-food and other exports that are related. I would never want to give up on our manufacturing, our skilled manufacturing workers. That's my primary concern. You cannot be a rich country without a manufacturing sector, and a significant one. But to have workable trade agreements when our economic model, which is based in large part on trade, deep integration with the United States, we cannot have trade agreements with other countries unless there's a quid pro quo. So we have to accept imports, in this case from China. They're a manufacturing superpower. They have 1/3 of global manufacturing, so there has to be give and take. We cannot only export. This leads to my second point, which is, what do we do with our manufacturing, our automotive manufacturing sector, which we've had for more than 100 years, and for the 500,000 workers, primarily in Ontario, that depend on this sector for their prosperity, middle-class families that require middle class or require good incomes for good jobs. What do we do? One choice that we have, and I think we have two broad choices, and maybe if we're with a mix of good policy and luck, maybe we have 3 choices. One is to go deeper into North American integration, into a kind of fortress North America. We haven't been in a fortress North America, but we've been in a free trade agreement, NAFTA, and then CUSMA, which came at the request of the Trump administration. We've had that, And what we've seen since the turn of the century, when our automobile production peaked at 3 million vehicles, we've seen a sector in long-term decline. Last year, we produced only 1.2 million vehicles compared to the 3 million 25 years ago. So we have seen in the context and on the NAFTA platform a migration of over 60% of our automobile production to Mexico and the United States. So we could stay in this platform where Mexico has emerged as one of the 6 largest automobile producers in the world, and we can try our luck there. Or we can go global. Or we can take a page out of Australia's book. And what has Australia done? I'm not saying we should do this. I think there's a third way, but Australia ceased as a result of a very strong currency and as a result of heavy government subsidies. They ceased to produce automobiles on a large basis about 2 to 3 years before COVID, and more than its entire auto manufacturing population has been absorbed in the defense sector, which is growing rapidly, and it's growing rapidly in the context of a defense industrial policy aimed at defense sovereignty in Australia. In this new defense, or this new and enlarged defense sector in Australia, the wages, the earnings are higher. I'm saying that we should consider these 2 options, and I think there's a third Canadian option, which is to admit or to accept willingly and happily that the United States will always be our largest trading partner. But we can take a page out of Australia's book, and we can have a mix of an automobile industry where we're producing EVs in a global sector where 70% of EVs...
Time is up, if you can just wind up.
That's time?
Yes.
Oh,
if you can.
okay.
You can talk further when we go into the round of questioning. And with that, we will go to Dr. Johnson Brissell. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today. Niagara College is a community college providing post-secondary education for over five decades, offering 1,950 courses, 130 full-time programs, 18 part-time programs, and 8,544 students. Colleges and universities are the foundational pillars from the future, serving as critical engines for economic growth, industry innovation, and social stability. Valero and Renan reported a significant association between GDP per capita with the post-secondary institutions, as well as affecting the views on democracy in the long-term basis. This committee is collecting information from the preliminary agreement between Canada with the People's Republic of China in the electrical vehicle sectors and its implications for the Canadian society. To understand the impact of the educational system, an analysis of the production of these electrical vehicles in Canada must be addressed first. In 2025, 10,700 zero-emission vehicles were produced and sold in Canada. Honda reported 55,987 conventional hybrid vehicles produced and 35,325 sold in Canada, for a total of 46,025. This figure represents the production of AGVs and ZEVs sold domestically and accounts for 93% of the quota of vehicles produced in China, which is anticipated to be commercialized in Canada. Although the initial projections indicate that the automotive industry would bear the brunt of the change, the implementation of a quota for electrical vehicles in Canada has given rise to a far more significant and intricate imbalance. The low-carbon industry working force requires technical skills sets that align technology with green literacy, transferable skills shifting from fossil fuels to renewable energy, and new energy efficiency and technologies for carbon capture. The current geopolitical climate has thrust the world into an unprecedented reality that we can no longer ignore. Unemployment in Canada has capped in 6.7% over the past 6 months, while this new industry, such as the low-carbon, struggles to find workers with the skills necessary to perform with the new industry technology. The skills shortages account for 7% of the labor productivity gap, placing Canada behind the United States. The projections for low-carbon industry are encouraging. However, constraints but training and skills to adapt to the new technologies. The current EV arrangements will affect the production of EVs in Canada and in Ontario, with consequences not only for employment, but recruiting, retention, and retraining of the workforce. Different regions and countries are now competing for a limited pool of the skilled labor. Canada is experiencing nearly in every sector labor shortage with a greater impact into skilled trades opportunities. The Canadian Occupation Projection System has estimated 1.2 million jobs opening in skilled trades between 2022 and 2031. 1 in 5 red seals works are in the retirement age. Adding to the already mentioned factors to limit and constrain the post-secondary sector, between 12 and 22% of total jobs across Canada relied on exports. And to adapt to the new market, the automotive industry have retrained and skill shifting towards electrical vehicles and the low-carbon industry, making the decision on imports a challenge for the job market. Given the intersection challenges stated above, growing evidence suggests that importing electrical vehicles not be manufactured in Canada, equipped with foreigner software and telemetry, not only represent a disadvantage to our society, but in the long run a challenge for consumers when maintaining and keeping their vehicles. Other technological challenges have arisen from EV technology in recent years when addressing safety concerns and how to rescue vehicles and passengers from accidents involving fire and battery packs that accumulate 680 volts and 140 amps of live current. Niagara College, in partnership with an economical institution, has launched a program to educate and train firefighters, paramedics on this technology. This was only possible due to the partnership with the automotive industry and their guidance and reliable access to design and engineering specifications to safely and reliably put fires while rescuing victims. Relying solely on market dynamics will not adequately capture the socioeconomic benefits of the low-carbon economy. We must instead actively pursue industry strategies that employ a target set of policies, instruments, and strategies involving all sectors of our economy to achieve favorable outcomes and build together the future.
Thank you. And now with that, we will get into our first round of questioning, and we will begin our 6-minute round with MP Baldinelli. Please go ahead. You will have 6 minutes, MP Baldinelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I'm going to begin with you, Dr. Johnson-Bresnan. Thank you for being here. Niagara College is ranked the #1 research college in Canada, and it attracts over $40 million in funding, going back to 23-24. I'm always so proud to highlight the incredible work of its students and faculty at our Niagara-on-the-Lake campus and the important work that is being done in Welland as well. And, Ms. President, Niagara College has a number of programs for students looking to enter into Canada's auto manufacturing sector. In 2018, the college opened a new $1.4 million green automotive technology lab. In 2024, the college received funding from the federal government, about $365 million, into their motive program, power program. And then in 2025, you've got this innovative program with RBC Foundation, which helped fund an electric vehicle first responders training program at Niagara College, and that was worth about $450,000 in pledged programs. So it's incredible the work that you're doing in such a short amount of time. And you talked about it with the Chinese 49,000 assembled Chinese EVs coming into the country. You talked about the disadvantage that has. And so, you know, are Chinese EVs a risk and threat to the future and viability of EV auto manufacturing programs like the one at Niagara College?
Thank you for your question. I think that the challenge that it's posed here is that we have no access to the design of these vehicles. And having access to the design of the vehicles that we have currently on the cars that we have inside Canada at the moment, we are finding challenges to actually make sure that we are safely deploying rescue teams when rescuing people from these vehicles during accidents. When we, in this partnership, if we don't have any access to this design and the specification of these cars, we have no idea how to actually deactivate a battery that can actually kill someone, like a paramedic getting into a car as a first responder and having no idea if that battery is alive or is unplugged at the moment of the accident. So we don't have have actually access to those plans.
And that's interesting. From a research perspective, for example, the big three automakers spend about $980 million each year on research here in North America. And that flows down to places like Niagara College and through your programs that you present to students who enroll. So, I mean, Chinese EVs and Chinese companies will not be doing that research. So what's the impact on Niagara College, for example? What would the impact on future student enrollment because of that loss in research dollars?
The research dollars are just one piece of the impact. When we think about how many of the trades are inside an automotive plant and manufacturing, we are talking about all of them, from welders to motive powers to electricians to all of the trades. The impact in research is enormous, because part of what we are doing at Niagara College right now is research on this sector and how actually to identify these key factors of the batteries and the construction, the building of the car, that we can only do because we are in constant communication and development of this research with the automotive industry. Now, in a partnership, it is possible, if this partnership we have access to the specifications and the development of these cars, that I am not certain we have.
Now, if I quickly could, because the great thing about the college system is the relationships it establishes within the communities, the businesses that utilize the services and the training of the students that are there. We have an engine propulsion system, General Motors, located in St. Catharines. GM has a relationship with Niagara College. Do you think that could be put at risk with the continued use and pursue as the government pursues Chinese EVs?
If their manufacturing, if their plant and the jobs that they have today are placed in risk, then their relationship with the college, not just Niagara College, but any college, yes, will be at risk.
And quick question. I mean, and you mentioned it in your remarks. Last week we had all members would have probably met with local firefighters. The International Association of Firefighters were in town, and Tim Lee, the union from Niagara Falls, was in town. The number one issue that they had and discussed was lithium-ion battery fires, which they describe as not ordinary fires. When a cell enters thermal runway, it generates intense heat that can exceed 700 degrees Celsius. You talked about that innovative program that was struck last year with RBC Foundation, so that you could provide training to both firefighters and paramedics and emergency services personnel. So if you've got some time, can you just describe a little bit more about that program?
When a battery, a pack of battery actually get on fire, it can reach 3,000 Celsius. Cool. And if for any reason one of the cables that actually feed this battery is pinched or damaged for any reason, the car gets to a place that it can have 140 amps on its chassis. Just reminding you that 10 amps can kill you. So that will be 140. Depending on the vehicle, and that's the thing, we are talking about electrical vehicles, but we are not being very specific. What type of electrical vehicles? Are AGVs? Are they zero emission? Are they hybrids? What kind of technology we are talking? Because depending on the technology, we will not have an impact on our jobs, but depending on the technology, it will have a different impact in our economy. So we have provided this training.
Sorry for interrupting. Time has gone beyond Vibal journalists. Thank you. We will now proceed to MP Rana for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all the witnesses for your time. Professor Karagwisan, you recently argued that Canada is going to gain more than to lose from this arrangement, but some people, they're a little hard on it and they don't agree with these comments. What do you think? What are they missing?
That Canada will be a net beneficiary, or there'll be a larger Do you mean a net beneficiary or more than China would from a relationship with us? Do you mean will we benefit
Right.
in a
Yeah.
significant way? Well, if you do, there's these. We can do ivory tower economics, but we're not going to do that here, and I don't think we should do that at all. But there's some useful models in economics. One of them is the gravity model. How much trade would there be between two countries if there were only geography to consider and there was no geopolitics or tariffs? And my own back-of-the-envelope calculations and those of my colleagues and right across the board suggest that we'd go from about 130 billion in two-way trade with China to about 370 billion. Those are my own estimates based on how I compute the gravity model to get technical. But based on the fact that we're complementary economies, we're a natural resource superpower, they're a manufacturing superpower. My own estimates suggest a threefold increase within 10 to 20 years in trade if there were no geopolitical considerations.
Thank you very much. And how do you weigh the benefits of the cheaper EVs for Canadian consumers against the pressure they put on domestic producers? Is there a way to have both, or is that a real trade-off?
Well, I think there's a few benefits. One is affordability. Two is clean air and climate change mitigation. Three, if we want a broader relationship with China and the rest of the global South, there has to be a quid pro quo. We have to give something up. I'm not suggesting in any way to give up our manufacturing or our skilled workers, not in the least. So those are three. Four, the actions of the current Trump administration, the previous Biden administration, their actions are intentionally or not an attack on our economic model, and we have to expand trade with the rest of the world, with the global South, where 3 out of every 4 people on this planet live, and which has 60% of global GDP at purchasing power parity. So this is in our long-term interest to mend fences and to trade with the entire planet, and we can be a prosperous country even if some of our manufacturing is just parts of global supply chains. And then there's the technology transfer, and I'm talking about technology transfer from the People's Republic to Canada, where they lead in 66 of 76 technologies, according to the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, according to The Economist magazine, according to the EIU, and a range of other institutes with expertise in technology.
Do you think this arrangement will complicate the relations between the U.S. and Canada?
I do. I think it already has. But we're facing a kind of unintentional or intentional forced decline by Washington. They are making trade with the United States more costly with us. We've been an incredibly loyal ally. We've not hurt them in any way, and they are making trade with the United States costly with a range of tariffs. They're telling us that they're going to repatriate the rest of the automobile sector with the Detroit Three. And they're also telling us that if we try and diversify our exports, they'll punish us. So our only choice is to diversify our exports, which will make us more resilient, more sovereign, and in the long run, more prosperous.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
Dr. Karim, what are the biggest research gaps Canada needs to close to stay relevant in the battery space over the next decades?
Yes, merci beaucoup de la question.
Thank you for your question.
Aujourd'hui, la Chine, elle a fabriqué
Today, China has manufactured more than 410 gigawatt hours of batteries made of lithium iron phosphate, which is the safest type of battery in the world. It does not catch on fire, doesn't explode. However, this technology was developed here in Canada, in Quebec, between Hydro-Quebec and the University of Montreal and the University of Texas. So we know this technology very well. This is good news that Chinese vehicles will have this technology here in Canada. On the other hand, Quebec, in particular Hydro-Quebec, has a lot of experience in batteries in Canada. Today, we have no choice because lithium is the lightest metal and the smallest metals. So the energy density of a lithium battery will be operational for more than 100 years. However, there's research underway in the area of sodium as well as other types of batteries that have significant energy density. However, in Canada,
La relation
perhaps with our relationship with China, we need to introduce industrialization in Canada, given our clean energy ecosystem and our human capital. We're missing a lot of things at scale and a lot of extrapolation toward industrialization. Industrialization will play a very important role. And 30 or 40 years ago, Moldy Energy in Vancouver and Hydro-Quebec made a significant advance. And we have no choice but to reflect on the way that we work with China and to establish.
Is up for MP Rana.
Yes, donc le focus et les
So the focus needs to be on the ion lithium battery, its industrialization, and the creation of jobs here in Canada.
Now we will proceed to MP Blanchet-Jonca for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
La première question pour M. Zaïb.
My first question is for Mr. Zaib. Canada's main issue, in your opinion, is it our capacity to industrialize or to commercialize innovation?
J'ai commencé à vraiment vous expliquer
I started to explain the circular economy to you from the mine up until recycling, critical minerals, their processing, lithium, cobalt, etc., the manufacturing of the cell and the module, and then the recycling. Today, the ecosystem between the mine and consumption, well, we know how to do things. However, the gap is the manufacturing of the cell, which requires intensive funding. 30 or 40 years ago, we thought
les bras.
that Canada is the brain and Asia is going to be the arms, but that was a mistake. So we need to bring this transition back, this industrial transition in terms of manufacturing, in particular the cells that should be built in Canada. We need to focus on LEP and NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt, whether it's graphite or copper, nickel, cobalt, manganese, aluminum, iron, phosphate. All these critical minerals are here in Canada. So processing is not a problem, but let us focus on how we're going to manufacture cells in Canada today. Thank you. And so how can we make sure that the fruit of Canadian or Quebecois research in the area of electrification remain in Canada as opposed to having seen them exploited elsewhere? Well, whether it's universities or industrial players, every time there's an invention, a patent, there needs to be an Ontario or Quebec or Canada clause according to which the technology is made or used here in Canada before being dispatched elsewhere. And this needs to be done with the federal government or with provincial governments so that these technologies remain in Canada. In your opinion, can Canada be competitive without mastering the entire value chain, batteries, extraction, up until the recycling phase?
Un écosystème exceptionnel.
We have an exceptional ecosystem, and we have all the critical minerals. I just named them. We have green energy, especially in Quebec. We have the human capital. We have deep water ports. Canada does trade with the entirety of the G7. But what we're lacking is the machinery and the work at scale. We need this expertise to industrialize quickly and to establish factories. Yes, we're competitive because our energy is cheap. We have critical minerals. I'll give you a simple example. So Tesla and Panasonic makes batteries for Tesla. So lithium comes from Chile. It's processed in Europe and then taken to China. The nickel comes from Indonesia and it's processed in Japan. Cobalt comes from the Congo and it goes through China to be processed in Japan. the artificial graphite is a technology dominated by the Chinese, and all of these electrode and anode materials come from Asia, so that the supply chain is not directed to the US. So imagine the logistics, imagine the time aboard vessels. So if we're able to create a stable and green supply chain in Canada, I think that this is the strategy. So given hydroelectricity, which you mentioned earlier, critical minerals, we have the expertise in the area of batteries. In your opinion, is Quebec, that has all these things, does Quebec have a strategic advantage that Canada is not currently exploiting? Well, we need to exploit it. When I was at Hydro-Quebec, I brought in Sony at the time, and there wasn't what we today call a political movement toward the manufacturing of cells. So we really need to work with well-established companies, whether they're Chinese or otherwise, to develop the first supply chains or the assembly lines and to make cells in Quebec. In your opinion, is battery recycling a strategic lever to ensure sovereignty over critical minerals? I always say that we need to think about the balance between the urban mine and the natural mine. The natural mine means critical minerals. So you, the politicians, need to think about legislation for 2040 or 2050, according to which 50% of a battery manufactured in Canada needs to have at least 50% recycled materials. The demand is significant, and there are two things, because we're moving towards the electrification of our society, AI, battery storage. And so we're not talking about critical minerals here. And so the demand is significant. Without recycling, we won't have enough. So we really need to find the balance between the natural mine and recycling. That's becoming very important. However, we also need to think about the logistics. How can we recycle? How can we have a one-stop shop setting? How can we recycle vehicle batteries and other ones?
And with this, the first round comes to an end, and we will proceed now with the second round of questioning. And we will begin with MP Holman for 5 minutes. Please go ahead, MP Holman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses that are here today at the Science and Research Committee. Dr. Zaghib, Canada has a strong potential in batteries and electrification. My question is, how critical is it for Canada to build end-to-end capacity from critical minerals to battery production to vehicle integration rather than relying on imports?
Yeah, as I said, there are some steps that we are able to do it. As I explained, if you have from the mine for the transformations, this is not a very heavy investment. We have the technology, we have universities, we have the institute. And it's very good that we can create the chance supply for the first and second transformation, not selling our raw materials outside. This is a big mistake. This is step one, and step 2, I think Canada, we're able to do it, okay? And then when we go to make, okay, what we call it, lithium-ion batteries. The batteries divide on 3 parts. Anode, negative, cathode, positive, and electrolyte. The state of lithium in anode and cathode is, we call it ion. This is what lithium ions. So we have no technology and we have not the machine today that we make these cells. We need really to collaborate with Asian company in order we come back this process and the scalability. And then when we have the cells, after that, we're going to have the module. The module, what means it's collection with 200, 300 cells and the pack. Cell and pack is easy for us. We can do it in Canada. So the part that we need really collaboration and heavy intensive finance is the cells.
Where in the EV value chain are the highest valued jobs and economic benefits created? And what happens if Canada loses those stages to other countries?
I don't think so that we can lose. This is for other countries. The demand of, we saw recently what happened with the Iran war, that our dependence on oil and so on. I have been working for EV and battery for 40 years, okay? And I have asthma, so sometimes we forget that 8 million of people pass away. This is from Harvard numbers. So I don't think so that we are losing this expertise. We need really to be smart. What's the best partner for Canada in order that this partner can invest with us on research and development, innovation, commercialization, scale up and also commercializations. And we need to be on the relation win-win. And this is, as I said, we need to have this transition as soon as possible.
If Canada imports more finished EVs rather than building them domestically, what do we risk losing in terms of innovation, intellectual property, and long-term competitiveness?
My thinking is step by step, okay? Right now, as you know, student, medium class, they need to have electric vehicles, which is affordable for everyone, okay? So I think the mistake is just only buying for external vehicles. So we need with these partners, if they're selling batteries here, EV here, they need to invest on the research institute. They invest on really, as I said, manufacturing, sales, and EV. I think 40 years ago, do you remember, or 50 or 60 years ago, Japanese cars like Honda, Toyota, Mazda was really like anti-Japanese and so on. You see Toyota today, Honda today, they make these cars here or this HEV or EV here in our countries. We need to think about a win-win situation and not only as buying a car. So we need to manufacture together here, but by steps. I think the first step is really to show that we're going to accelerate the penetration of electric vehicles, and the step as soon as possible. Let's make these models or the next models EV here. Want to create jobs, to have the innovations, and license technology to existing factory that we build here in Canada.
So how difficult would it be to rebuild that capacity once it's lost here in Canada, in your opinion?
Yeah,
Quick 10-second answer.
Oh.
Yes. My experience is really to think as joint ventures, starting to make the first lines together to learn for that, try to create, as you know, Gigafactory is really to think about operators, technology, school of battery, learning from these partners, and then implemented by ourselves for next generation or next pilot line and so on. So we need to learn and implement it to this country.
Thank you. Time is up for MP Holman. Now we will go to MP de Chanterion for 5 minutes. Please go ahead, MP de Chanterion.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, professeur.
Thank you, Professor Karagousian. Thank you for your remarks. In January, you published an article in Maclean's where you dispelled certain myths regarding the arrangement with China. This is the Science Committee. We need to be rigorous and avoid sensationalist words. So I'd like to give you the opportunity to correct some false information in terms of the arrangement with China. So I'd like to hear from you on that.
Is my on? Just a counter question. Do you mean with respect to the importation of Chinese vehicles and national security?
Oui, donc au niveau de l'article que vous avez publié dans...
In terms of the article that you published in Maclean's, where you spoke about economic diversification, security issues, you were addressing various myths.
Thank you. So I'll be brief. I'll stay within the time. I think I have 30 seconds. I think the idea that Chinese EVs pose a risk to national security because they're spy machines on four wheels. I do think that's nonsense. So we can ask our Australian friends about that. I believe 41% of the entire EV market are Chinese brands made in China, and 80% of the total EV market are other brands, including Chinese brands that are made in China. I don't think that importing 49,000 vehicles, and even if that rises to 70,000 by 2031, is going to wipe out our industry. I believe my colleague sitting next to me from the Niagara College, Niagara University, said that we only make 15,000 EVs a year in Canada, something like that, and the importation is it's less than 3% of total vehicle sales in Canada, including fossil fuel vehicles. I also think that we should clarify a certain point about importing vehicles from China. There has to be a quid pro quo in tariff relief, trade agreements, and strategic partnerships. We have a diverse country. The West produces food and energy. The East Coast has fisheries. Ontario is manufacturing, and British Columbia is a mix, but it's mostly natural resources, energy, and tourism. These are in our comparative advantage. We cannot sacrifice the entire country or the rest of the country because of 49,000 vehicles, and especially at a time when the new government under Prime Minister Carney is embarking on nation-building projects, a defense industrial policy, and an automotive industrial policy that's going to protect, which would be my first priority, skilled manufacturing workers. So I just do not think this poses a threat, the importation of 49,000 vehicles, to our economic prosperity, to our national security, and I think we could probably handle a lot more because we're going to have to cooperate with China. They represent 1/5 of humanity, and they're the largest economy in the world at a purchasing power parity basis, and we're going to have to get along with India and other countries as well. It's a big world out there. We're always going to be trading mostly with the United States, 50%, 60%, maybe more, probably down from the 80%, but they represent 4.5% of the world's population. And our trade with the rest of the world for our long-term prosperity is going to have to rise as a trading nation. Thank you. I hope I answered your question.
Merci, oui. Et justement,
Thank you. Yes. And the article that I was citing from Maclean's, you provided the example of iPhones that are assembled for the most part in China and that we can use them safely in Canada. So could you tell us a little bit more about this comparison that you raised on iPhones?
And I made that point for a couple of reasons. One, the point on iPhones. If a country, any country, is intent on spying on Canada, why would they use vehicles, automobiles? Why would they not use, in this particular case, the idea that China is going to spy on us with automobiles? I'm sorry, but I do find it laughable. They assemble, I think, 85% of the world's iPhones. I believe most people in this room have some kind of smart device, probably an iPhone. So if they're going to plant espionage software to spy on the West, would they not do it with iPhones? Would they not use their space station? So I just think we need to dispel certain things. We need to protect our sovereignty and our national security. Those are things that I take very, very seriously, as well as human rights. I come from a people who lost all their human rights on my father's side. These are issues I take very seriously, but I think we have to get away from some of the national security hysteria that has been created outside of this country so that we do not trade with China, and so that the particular country where this national security hysteria was created, so that they can maintain leverage over us. And I'm not talking
Sorry
about
for interrupting. Time is up for MP Chanterian. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will now proceed to MP Blanchet-Juncker for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Professeur, avec nous aujourd'hui ici en...
So for the professor with us here in the room, I'd just like to understand what you were saying. You said from your point of view that there's no threat when it comes to importing 49,000 Chinese vehicles. So the government has said to us on April 17th, Prime Minister Mark Carney said that the greatest threat for our security is China. And the government in August 2024 on the 26th said that it wanted to put 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. So on the basis that these vehicles had technology that threatened Canadians' data and as well as national security interests. So the government's saying one thing, and now today it's saying the opposite, or it's trying to minimize what was mentioned. I'd like to hear from you on this.
Thank you for your question. Political figures, all of them, say many things. I can't account for what certain political figures say at certain times, whether it's during elections or before elections or after elections. I'm speaking here based on my own experience and based on my own world vision. And we live in a world that can be very, very dangerous. We live in a world that can have cutthroat competition. I think we have to remember that as a country, rich as we are, having the second largest inheritance of energy and natural resources and land and water after the Russian Federation. We have the second largest inheritance in the world. But we still can't sit on our laurels as a nation, whether it's respect to national security or whether it's respect to our long-term prosperity. But my comments on this come from my own experience, my own world vision, and it doesn't seem plausible to me that 49,000 cars is going to wipe out our automobile industry and our workers, which I would make as our first priority, our skilled workers. I don't think that it poses a national security risk for the very reason that all of our smart devices are made in East Asia, or most of them, and our iPhones are assembled in China. If you want to spy on somebody, would you not use a communications device? Would you not use your brand new space station? As far as the economy is concerned, in terms of wiping out our automotive industry has contracted by 60% because of the NAFTA platform. And I say this as a pro-market economist.
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up. Maybe we... okay, and now with that, we will go to MPD Ritter for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Mr. Karagiosian, am I close? Okay. Thank you. I want to make sure that I have correct pronunciation. Thank you for being here with us today. I have a couple of questions that I just would like a yes or no on, please. Do you have any national security training?
No.
And have you talked with the Privacy Commissioner of Canada at all?
No, I haven't.
So it's in your sole opinion that it doesn't pose a national security threat to bring Chinese EVs into Canada?
Yes or no?
Yes.
No, I don't think it does. No, I don't.
I'm asking if it's just based on your own sole opinion.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you for that. You also think that we should move beyond U.S.-centric policy. So in practical terms, what does that look like when our auto sector is structurally integrated with the U.S. market?
Well, what it looks like is that if we want to engage with, I think we have to be clear about the context that we're in. We're facing a set of converging crises. On the economy, an attack, intentional or not, it doesn't matter, on our economic model. Our economic model is predicated on international trade, primarily with the United States. Our economic model, our social welfare state that we all enjoy being Canadians, even if it's under strain, was built when there were 7 workers per pensioner. And we don't have that anymore. There are 2.5 workers per pensioner right now. So our model is under attack, and we need to adjust. The very country that we trade most with is making it more difficult and costly to trade with them. So if we want to maintain our prosperity as a trading nation with only 41 million people, we have to engage with the rest of the world. What it looks like for our automotive sector, Australia provides one example. We don't have to follow the Australian model where they've abandoned the assembly of automobiles, become integrated in supply chains, and have moved most of that manufacturing base into the defense sector. We can have an automotive industry, but the People's Republic of China accounts for 70% of global production, and we can integrate in their supply chains, and we can still make cars here. Their car makers make cars in 17 to 20 countries. I believe just BYD makes cars in 17 countries outside of China. It really depends on what you negotiate with them. And we can negotiate an agreement where we import cars and where we use our supply chains, our critical minerals, our inexpensive electricity. As the honourable member from Quebec was talking about, we have a lot of advantages. So we can trade, we can invest, not only with China, with the entire planet.
Do you think that those same negotiating strengths that we have in Canada should not be used as well in ensuring that we maintain our biggest trading partner that we have in our CUSMA negotiations as well?
Absolutely, I do. We send 75% of our exports to the United States, and yet the people that run this country are making trade with them extremely costly. It is because of the NAFTA platform that our industry is contracted by 60%. Why? Because the big three could move to Mexico.
So if we have 75% of our market going to our biggest trading partner, but then we're trying to diversify our markets and adding extra constraint to maintaining those trade relationships and putting barriers in the way, do you not think that would have a reverse economic impact, especially in our automotive sector?
But our automotive sector has been in terminal decline since the turn of the century. And we have there's the whole rest of the country that we have to think about. The fisheries in the Atlantic, the farmers in the West, our energy sector. We have a big, diverse country, and we have an industrial policy for defense and for the automotive sector. And I don't think it's right to be passive in the face of power that says, you're going to pay tariffs to trade with us, 50% in some cases on your steel, 25% on your automobiles. The leader of this country is saying we're bringing back the rest of the automobile production. So we could be passive in the face of this, or we can be proactive, as Prime Minister Carney is being. And he's saying that, okay, I'm going to take that as given. I can't change what you're doing, but I'm going to trade more with the rest of the world. And as a sovereign nation, we should be allowed to do that, whether it's China or Brazil or India or Europe or whoever. We, as a sovereign nation, we should be allowed to trade with whomever we want.
So the reality is, though, is that a lot of these trading relationships already did exist before the current Prime Minister.
They did.
There was 51 of them that actually already existed before him traveling around the world and making new trade agreements, which there's actually been none, happen in this past year. And
up for you, MP Ritter. And now we will end this panel with MP Rana for 5 minutes. MP Rana, go ahead.
I welcome you, Dr. Johnson-Brezen. I am from McMaster University City, from Hamilton. So there have been a wave of investments announced in EVs and battery manufacturing in Canada. Is the college system ready to supply the workers plants are going to need, or is there a gap?
That's a complex question, but partially. I'll say that the college sector in general, just not talking about Niagara College, is adapting to new technologies that goes from cyber-physical systems to low-carbon industry. That is what we are talking today. We are getting ready for it. Some colleges have more than others and depend on the investment of research that come from industry and other governmental institutions. But we are not, I'm not going to say 100%. I would say that, 75% ready to deploy that trade skill workforce.
Thank you. And more EVs on the road also means more demands for electrifications, chargers, installers, and service technicians outside the factory floor. So are there the trades training keeping up with that side of things?
That is... So when we train our students to actually work in these new technologies, we train them 2 ways. One, to work with the new technologies so they cannot be replaced. Another, to also be critical and actually work with the new technologies. So we are not training them to be operators, but also thinkers and actually help on this new industry. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, you're right. And if there's one thing the federal government could do to do better, align skills training with where this sector is heading, what would that be?
It will really create policies that ensure that we are part of this industry. So as all my colleagues have said already, it could be a great opportunity for us to create our own industry to actually support this in the future. And that will actually help this future of not just trades, but all other professions that are involved on this advancement. So if the government could, do one magic thing, it will really be to create a policy that ensure that we are building in Canada.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Zaghib,
Thank you.
we mostly talk about EVs in terms of cars, but you work on electrification more broadly. Where do you think the bigger opportunities are that are not getting enough attention?
Yeah, I believe when you see the market is divided on three parts, the consumer electronics, the EV, and energy storage. As I am leading electrification of the society, you can see the next 20 years there be big demand on the electricity because of electrification of transportation and the AI, artificial intelligence. So not only EV, we need also to think about green energy like solars and wind, or increasing even the nuclears, the civil nuclear for energy, and the storage. Storage become very important because, especially in the winters when you have a peak demand and so on, so the storage and this battery can play an important role. Of course, consumer electronics is a very small part, but we need really to focus on energy storage with the electric vehicles. And then what happened, sometimes we forget, we call it V2X, vehicle to grid, vehicle to home. As you know, in Canada, we have cold winters, we have ice storm, we have storms and so on. And sometimes when we lose the grid, your electric vehicles or your home or your solar panels and your batteries will play an important role, not only for your home and then also you see our friend Indigenous and First Nations, for the off-grid we need also to think about them, that the battery will play an important role for the off-grid, that we cannot bring the transportation line to the communities and so on. So focusing on energy storage and focusing on the EV, this is the most important part.
Thank you. And there have been real public money put into programs like Voltage and the innovation clusters. What makes that kind of investment turn
Sorry
into
for
something
interrupting,
industrial?
Andrivana, your time is up. And we have to end this panel. Maybe you can complete your question, and then if the witnesses want to submit in a written response.
Thank you, Madam. So what makes that kind of investment turn into something industrial, and where does it tend to get stuck?
Okay, thank you. So if you would risk, who was it directed for, the question? Okay, Dr. Zaghib, if you can submit a written response to this question, that would be great, because we have to...
Yes, very, very quick. If you see, I like to learn a lot.
We have to end this panel because we have to take the second panel. So you can send a written response. So with that, on behalf of all the members, I want to thank all the three witnesses for appearing before the committee and providing your important input towards this study. And the meeting is suspended. ready, I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and the members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on the Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And with that, for our second panel, I would like to welcome our witnesses. We are joined by Sarah Goldfeder, Executive Director, Government Relations and Corporate Affairs, representing General Motors of Canada Limited. Welcome. We are also joined by Brendan Sweeney, President and Chief Executive Officer, representing Pacific Manufacturing Association of Canada. Welcome. And we are joined by video conference by Bentley Allen, Vice President, Future Economy from the Transition Accelerator. Welcome to all the three witnesses. All of you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we will go into our round of questioning. And with that, we will start with Madame Goldfeder. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to appear today as part of your study on the implications of the Canada-China Preliminary Joint Arrangement on the electric vehicle sector. General Motors of Canada is concerned about the change to the EV surtax, particularly the lack of appropriate security guardrails around it. Unfettered access, even if limited by quotas, will weaken Canada's ability to protect its people, its national interests, and its automotive, industrial, and technology base. Previous actions undertaken by the government protected our workforce and preserved protections for consumers and for a Canadian way of life that the auto sector has helped to sustain. You've heard from other witnesses about the security risks posed by connected electric vehicles controlled by foreign actors. If manipulated by bad actors, the hardware, software, and data these vehicles collect could enable foreign surveillance, espionage, and sabotage that could target individual Canadians, communities, critical transportation and energy infrastructure, and civic and political leaders. These risks are real, clear, tangible, and immediate. They compound and become deeply ingrained as more foreign EV imports operate in Canada from potentially hostile powers. The government is well aware of these risks, as they have been well briefed on the threats, both through consultations and conversations with Transport Canada and ISED work groups. The risks are not only near-term. There are larger strategic national security risks that could be even more detrimental to Canada's ability to chart its course on global trade and security. This arrangement makes Canada more dependent on foreign entities, not only for finished vehicles, but for the ecosystem of emerging technologies that will shape the sector's future. As a nation, Canada has only just begun investing in the supply chains and technologies needed for the EV transition: critical minerals, batteries, rare earths, motors, sensors, software, industrial robotics, and advanced manufacturing. With the current economic environment and consumer demand, investment has slowed. We are in a fragile moment. We should protect progress, not endanger it. This agreement will bring in products that rely on highly subsidized, opaque supply chains and on labor and supplier inputs centered outside of North America. This will undermine Canada's supplier base and hollow out our skilled automotive workforce. General Motors of Canada is the #1 seller of EVs in Canada today, with just under 20% of market share. Just over 4,000 vehicles in the first quarter of this year. Put differently, 49,000 EVs this year would equate to 1/3 of the current market. At a minimum, we must ensure that any EVs entering Canada compete on fair, rules-based terms and fully meet Canadian safety, environmental, labor, cybersecurity, and data governance standards. Thank you for the opportunity to appear. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. And now we will proceed to Mr. Sweeney for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this important study. My name is Brendan Sweeney, and I'm the President and CEO of the Pacific Manufacturing Association of Canada, or PMAC. PMAC's members include Honda and Toyota, the largest vehicle manufacturers in Canada. PMAC's about a month old. My comments today focus on implications to industry rather than science or research. PMAC is concerned about the implications of any agreement that reverses an astute decision made in 2024 to place a surtax on EVs imported from China and instead provides non-market actors with access to Canada's vehicle market. This undermines investments PMAC members have made in Canada, disrupts the level playing field we've worked hard to create, and introduces a vehicle assembly plant size irritant onto the CUSMA negotiating table. PMAC members began manufacturing vehicles in Canada in 1986. Their manufacturing footprint and economic impact has grown considerably since. In 2025, PMAC members manufactured 77% of all the vehicles assembled in Canada and employed 60% of all vehicle assembly plant workers. Those employed by PMAC members enjoy higher wages, greater job security, and more opportunities for advancement than in other plants. PMAC members Honda and Toyota are unique among automakers in Canada in that they continue to operate their Canadian vehicle assembly plants at or near full capacity and have never engaged in assembly plant layoffs. Moreover, a growing majority of vehicles assembled in Canada by PMAC members are electrified. They're hybrid electric. The Canadian manufacturing footprint and economic impact of PMAC members has grown as the result of investments in a policy environment that is supportive, that is market-oriented, and until recently that offered a level playing field to vehicle manufacturers from Japan, the United States, South Korea, and the EU alike. PMAC members appreciate any efforts by the federal government to maintain this level playing field which supports our mutual success. Allowing the import of any number of vehicles manufactured by non-market actors at or below a most favored nation tariff rate disrupts this level playing field. It jeopardizes the ability of PMAC members and presumably other market-oriented actors to compete, to innovate, and to contribute to Canada's economy. PMAC is especially concerned about disrupting this level playing field when non-market actors have engaged in questionable practices related to intellectual property, received and continue to receive unprecedented state subsidies, rely on inputs manufactured with forced labor, and generally have little interest in market-based competition or in making meaningful investments. And a complete knockdown or a CKD facility, that's not a meaningful investment in the jurisdictions to which they seek to export vehicles. It's important to be realistic. There are ways to engage constructively with China. There are ways to do business with Chinese companies, but we at PMAC do not believe that a vehicle import quota is the best option. We have built an integrated and productive North American automotive industry in which market-based actors like Honda and Toyota have invested in Canada and made significant progress related to electrification. There's work to do to reestablish a productive relationship with the United States, the primary destination of 90% of vehicles made in Canada, taking actions that are misaligned with those of our largest trading partner doesn't help to reestablish that productive relationship. Thank you. Look forward to your questions.
Mr. Sweeney, we will now proceed to Mr. Allen for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and honorable members. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. So I'm an associate professor of political science at Johns Hopkins University, as well as a vice president of future economy at the Transition Accelerator. And I'm also the founding director of the Center for Industrial Policy, an initiative that we launched this month to bring rigorous analysis to Canadian industrial strategy at a moment when the stakes are extraordinarily high and getting higher almost every day. Some overall remarks here have two key messages. One's urgent and one's constructive. The urgent message is that the condition of Canada's auto sector is more serious than the headline numbers suggest. And the trajectory of the Canadian auto sector should be understood as an emergency for Canada's manufacturing as a whole, especially within the context of Prime Minister Carney's drive to create more geopolitical leverage and secure our autonomy in a dangerous world. The constructive message is that the federal government's February 2026 auto strategy is, in its basic design and setup, a really excellent piece of strategic work by the government. The task, I think, before this committee is to ensure that those tools are deployed within a coherent strategic framework so that the strategy can actually translate into productive capability on Canadian soil, and so that the industry here in Canada can once again compete at the global technological frontier. So in every major industrial economy, the automotive sector is not just one industry among many. It's the anchor of the manufacturing base, and it's a systems integrator that brings together a country's most advanced production capabilities. Where automotive manufacturing thrives, the surrounding ecosystem, whether it's the upstream steel and aluminum and metal that comes in, whether it's electronics or advanced materials or engineering services or digital services, and now increasingly AI, but also potential linkages to batteries and upstream critical minerals. When all of those are connected to a strong auto sector, they all thrive. And where the auto sector withers, the broader manufacturing economy tends to follow. And I think this is the context for understanding and evaluating Canada's current situation. According to a recent analysis for the Centre for Industrial Policy by Greg Morzieu and James Meadowcroft, Canada's vehicle production to sales ratio has fallen from 1.85 produced vehicles to 1 vehicle of sale in the mid-1990s to 0.7 to 1 in 2024. And so for the first time in a very long time, in many decades, Canada now consumes more vehicles than it assembles. This is a major long-term contraction that predates the trade turbulence of the last couple of years. And that headline number of 0.7 to 1, as troubling as it is, actually understates the severity of the problem. New analysis from our center that draws on OECD trade and value-added data shows that the Canadian content embedded in those motor vehicles has actually fallen below 50%. So when it's combined with the production to sales ratio, we really end up getting, in value-added terms, 0.35 value added to every one car sold in Canada. So for every dollar of automotive value that Canadians consume, the Canadian economy is now producing about 35 cents into those vehicles. This should be understood as an emergency for Canada's manufacturing sector as a whole. Auto sectors anchor industrial economies, as I argued earlier, and when that anchor drags, then the rest of the economy, the rest of the manufacturing economy is likely to follow. And Canadian automotive R&D has stagnated alongside that production, with the country now accounting for less than 0.33% of global automotive patents. But pure subsidies or unstructured industry support will not help the situation. Good industrial policy means helping firms move to the global technology frontier while building a more competitive and productive industry. And to do that, we need generational investments in the industrial commons for electric vehicles and automotives generally, and a concerted effort to build value added in the upstream value chains by filling out the mines to mobility supply chain. So in this context, the auto strategy that was announced in February represents a meaningful step forward. As my colleague Mokabara and I argued at the time, its most important feature was the explicit integration of climate competitiveness with industrial policy. For too long, Canadian EV policy was structured around sales mandates and emissions reductions, compliance obligations, rather than the actual focused effort to build domestic industrial capability. And I think the new framework presents an opportunity to actually put in domestic industrial capability at the heart of Canadian automotive policy and Canadian EV policy. I think the remissions framework in particular deserves the particular attention of this committee. As designed, and I think as intended, as indicated in the Prime Minister and the Minister of Industry's remarks, it links preferential access to the Canadian market to investment in Canada, or it could be used to do this. Companies that then build here, like Toyota and GM and Honda, can generate credits. The companies that don't build here would not generate credits. And this is, I think, in its underlying logic, a direct echo of the duty remission scheme that Canada used in the 1980s to attract Japanese, Korean, and other offshore manufacturers into Canada. This is one of the most successful industrial policy instruments in Canadian economic history, and one that we can learn from today. Market access is a real source of leverage in a mid-sized economy like Canada.
Sorry for interrupting. Your time is up. If you can wind up in the next 15 seconds.
Sure. I just think we have to rethink Canada's value add in this new world, and there's an opportunity to do that through the remissions framework and through the auto policy that the Canadian government has articulated. And we can do that, I think, while being selectively exposed to Chinese EVs. We can do that with 49,000 Chinese EVs here in the economy. That would enable us to see what the competitive technological frontier looks like. But we're going to have to work hard to make sure that value added is actually built in the Canadian economy.
Thank you. And with that, we will start our first round of questioning, and we will begin with MP Baltinelli for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being with us this afternoon. Ms. Goldfeder, I'm going to begin with you. It's good to see you again, and thank you for being here. I was struck by your comments when you mentioned about the agreement that Canada has struck with the Chinese Communist government. You talked about we need to be protecting progress, not endangering it, and your fear is that's going to hollow out our skilled workforce. General Motors has been in Canada since 1918, and in my close community in Niagara and St. Catharines in particular since 1929. I had the pleasure of working 4 summers at that General Motors facility, and it put me through university. So I drive GM. I'm GM proud. But the concern that I have, GM had plans to put an EV battery component line in the powertrain facility there, but the market isn't there quite yet. I mean, in fact, in the last year, almost $70 billion in write-offs have been taken by the auto manufacturers. $7.6 billion by General Motors, Honda $15.7 billion. Altogether, when you add them up, it's almost $70 billion of all the write-offs that have been taking place. And now you talk about, General Motors currently being the largest EV manufacturer in North America and seller, and you're entering in 49,000, which is almost going to be 40% of the market now. So what's the impact on General Motors, and what's the impact on General Motors in St. Catharines because of that?
I think it's important to kind of preface this by saying that what we've seen in consumer demand for EVs has not been what we had thought we would see, and it has not been what I think the Canadian government or the auto manufacturers were hoping would actually come to pass. So we made a lot of really ambitious plans around St. Catharines, around CAMI at Ingersoll, around many of our plants in the United States and Mexico to move into an EV transition. And what changed wasn't the entry of any particular vehicle. It wasn't anything other than consumer demand in the long run. And so what we discovered is that, we had created a supply chain and created an infrastructure to build more vehicles than consumers were willing to purchase. And so that's one of the reasons that you see that we're at this particularly fragile moment right now, which I think means rather than look to another jurisdiction to provide us with vehicles, we should be continuing to protect the ecosystem that we have here.
Now, currently, the government's going to be allowing 49,000 vehicles into this country from China.
This year.
Now, can General Motors export into China?
No.
Any reason why?
The Chinese government likes to keep their market protected.
Protected. Thank you for that. Mr. Sweeney, I'm going to go to you now. The Japanese ambassador to Canada said that continued access to the U.S. market as provided for under CUSMA is essential for current and potential increased Japanese investment in auto manufacturing in Canada. So can I get your comments on that?
He's absolutely right.
So can you follow up? Sure. What is the main concern that your 2 companies would have with regards to the now allowing 49,000 Chinese vehicles into this country?
I think the primary concern is that in advance of what are probably going to be some pretty challenging negotiations with the United States, we've introduced that irritant.
That's a good word. It's an irritant now.
It's an irritant.
Right? I mean, the impact that it might have on your future manufacturing right now in terms of the production that both the 2 companies that you represent, Honda and Toyota, you're about, what, 70% now of the production that takes place here?
I believe in 2026 we're probably at 72 or so.
So what could the impact be on the employment and the workforces and the communities of those 2 companies?
I mean, we're doing the best we can. Our members are doing the best we can to continue to make vehicles under this tariff environment, and with the irritant that we've spoke about, and it would be difficult to maintain the same level of production at the same scale as is happening now without some other major intervention. We're in this for the long term. but that relationship with the United States, which is challenging, we've got to iron that out.
Well, and I think you had some excellent remarks earlier on when you talked the footprint has grown in North America, and what has been created was a level playing field, and you want to maintain the level playing field. And introducing 49,000 Chinese EV electric vehicles into this country will disrupt that. And I mean, the success of the North American auto sector was always based on the regulatory harmony and the agreements that we had in place, the supply chains that had been put in place over a 60-year period. And why are we trying to put that in danger of ending when for an agreement that I think gets us a one-year deal on canola?
I don't know either.
Madam Chair,
So.
how much
20
time?
seconds.
I'll see my time.
Okay, thank you. We will now proceed to MP Noor Mohammed for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank the witnesses for coming. Mr. Goldfeder, wondering if you could tell me how many GM employees have lost their jobs over the last 2 years?
So we have had to put all of our employees from CAMI, most of our employees from CAMI, on indefinite layoff, which because they're unionized employees, we continue to support them for the next couple of years.
And the reason for the indefinite layoff?
Was because the Bright Drop vehicles failed to take off in the market. So that was our electric
But I'm asking
delivery
across
van.
the company,
in
Canada.
That's the
it.
answer to the question that you asked me, which is why Ingersoll closed.
No, that's not what I asked you. I asked you how many GM employees have lost their jobs in Canada over the last
So
couple
I
of
was
years.
explaining that we had 1,200 employees at the CAMI facility, which closed because the Bright Drop electric delivery van never received the market that we expected it to. So that's 1,200 there that are on indefinite layoff. And then we have about 500 that left Oshawa's third shift.
And why was that?
So it was designed as a two-shift operation, which is the kind of the sweet spot of a facility. You want two shifts going. You want the capacity to increase manufacturing if you have a demand surge, which we saw post-COVID. So that third shift had come on post-COVID to deal with the demand surge that we saw for our pickup trucks.
And so you've seen no impact at all as a result of U.S. tariffs?
Correct.
Interesting. Okay. So if you've seen no impact at all because of U.S. tariffs, then why are so many others expressing their concerns?
I didn't say we weren't concerned. You asked me about our Canadian footprint.
Okay. But you didn't answer my question.
I think we are concerned.
Why are others concerned? So
We are
so
concerned.
what are the concerns?
We're concerned because we have an integrated North American market, and what we have right now is a challenging economic relationship between two of those partners.
And when you hear Donald Trump say he doesn't want Americans to buy cars made in Canada, what does that mean to you?
I hear him say that. I hear him say a lot of things. I don't know, like in our conversations, in the United States, we're hearing a slightly more nuanced take on that. And so I think that there is an avenue there for Canada and the United States to land on an agreement that would preserve our integrated auto sector and preserve manufacturing here in Canada.
How nuanced is it when the president of the United States says, I don't want Canadians to be making cars?
He said that publicly.
Right, he said that publicly.
Yep.
So we're not to take him at his word.
I think, there's lots of people that have said, take him seriously, if maybe not literally. So I think that we take it seriously, that we need to ensure that we have an integrated trading system between the two countries that is beneficial to both sides.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I would observe that we've had a very good conversation. We've had some interesting conversations in this committee over the last little while on some of the challenges and risks that have come forward. One of the things that I don't think we have spent a lot of time on is the positive impact of having EVs in this country, of EV infrastructure in this country, what it means for the future. So on that basis, I'd like to table a motion. I'd like to put forward a motion that reads as follows: that the committee conduct a survey of no less than 3 meetings on positive examples of EV infrastructure implementation with specific references to lessons learned from Quebec and British Columbia. And we'll be circulating that motion in both official languages. It is obviously relevant and tied to this study because I do think it's important for us to make sure that we are bringing this portion of the conversation into the conversation. And so I'd like to move that motion now.
Please go ahead.
I'm moving the motion that I just read out now.
Yeah, so we have to, like, is it?
Yeah, I just moved a motion.
Okay. Can you send it to the clerk
Yes,
in both
we'll send it to
official
the clerk,
languages?
yeah. Yes, in both official
Okay,
languages.
so
En
I'll
français, je peux aussi dire en français que le comité réalise.
And I can say it in French that the committee undertakes a study of at least 3 meetings on positive examples of electric vehicle implementation, focusing on the lessons learned from BC and Quebec.
Which is relevant to the study, and we will suspend the meeting for 2 minutes so that it can be circulated to all the members in both official languages. I would just request the witnesses to stay on, like we just have to deal with this, and then we will get back to our round of questioning. So the meeting is suspended. Mr. Noor Mohammed has moved a motion which is in order, and it has been circulated to all the members in both official languages, and the floor is open for debate. MP Noor Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that I think I've been not concerned about, but I would say that has been sort of top of mind as we've gone through this study, is that there's been an ongoing sort of sense that as we talk about the presence of Chinese EVs in the market, that this has somehow become conflated with the idea that all EVs are bad. And that there have been ongoing comments about how if we're not making, ICE vehicles, that somehow we have fallen off. And I think in the comments from one of our witnesses today about, the electric delivery vehicles. The implication here is that EVs somehow don't fit into our ecosystem. And one of the things that I would like to say, or I would like sort of us to consider, and part of the reason for this study, is that there is not only a lot of good things that have happened with having EVs in our communities and on our streets, but also the impact of the infrastructure that's being built around it has actually been really, really helpful. And if you look at BC, it's become quietly one of the most important case studies in clean transportation policy, and the lessons are actually quite impressive. When I was growing up, nobody knew what the heck an EV was. A decade ago, there was a single charger in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. All of BC, there was one EV charger. And while my colleague opposite thinks that this is somehow a filibuster, I just want to make a couple of points that are important before I cede my time to others. But I think it's really important for us not to conflate the things that we have been sort of talking about here. There are 5,000 public chargers in British Columbia right now, compared to in Vancouver, there's one gas station in downtown. And what you've seen now is that there are approximately 25% of vehicles now on the roads in BC, 22%, of light vehicle sales in BC are in fact zero emission vehicles. This is having a huge environmental impact at scale. The second piece of this is that this has been something that has not just been publicly funded, but privately funded. The private investment into new infrastructure has been hugely valuable. And we're seeing that you can now travel throughout the province of BC using your EV, and it is effective as using an internal combustion engine vehicle. And it's showed us that public-private partnership works. All of the things that we've been talking about in this study where we have had concerns, the presence of EV and EV infrastructure has actually helped become a big part of many of those solutions and address many of those concerns. In the case of BC, government set the framework, utilities built the backbone, and the private sector has filled the gaps. So when we talk about a study like this, I want to just point out simply that we are at this tipping point right now where political narratives around where cars are coming from is becoming conflated with the idea that we actually shouldn't somehow have EVs on the road. I've heard this insinuation from a number of witnesses, a number of folks. And sorry, my colleague opposite keeps interrupting me. So what I was trying to say is that we've heard this from folks that somehow there is somehow something wrong with the idea that we should be pursuing an aggressive EV strategy in this country. We've heard from previous witnesses that 49,000 vehicles aren't going to make a difference. What does make a difference is making sure that EVs in this country have the charging infrastructure that they require, that we're building that alongside other clean infrastructure, which has actually been happening. And it's frankly created jobs. It's created partnerships with Indigenous communities. It's been a substantial contributor to British Columbia. I suspect there are examples from Quebec and other provinces where this has worked. But I think it's important for us at this committee, when we're taking on topics like this, that we actually build in the space for looking at what has worked, so that if we're going to be talking about the impact of EVs writ large, whether they're imported, whether they are built in this country, that we also understand what it takes to put them on the roads. And so I think this is an important study in that regard. And I think that as we and this committee is sort of charged with making sure that we're looking at this from the context of science, that we actually do that, because you start to think about what powers a charge versus what powers a gas station, what powers some of these vehicles. It's really, really important for us to remember that in British Columbia, at least, it's powered by clean water, quite literally falling through turbines. And so these are the types of things that I think often get lost in this conversation, have been lost, I think, in this conversation. And so I think it behooves us all, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree, especially those of my colleagues across the way who may not admit to it but drive EVs, would be keen to sort of have a conversation about why this is important. Because frankly, the other thing that I think is important coming out of these examples, and I will stop after that, is why certain provinces have embraced EV infrastructure and building EV infrastructure to the benefit of consumers, to the benefit of ratepayers, to the benefit of taxpayers who tend to save a large amount of money buying EVs versus internal combustion engine vehicles. What's worked in BC and Quebec, and what other provinces could actually learn from that example. So my hope is the study is actually a productive one where we can actually have meaningful conversations, bring witnesses from those provinces, perhaps bring witnesses from jurisdictions where it hasn't gone as well because they haven't put the they haven't been able to or had the means to put the resources in to do that. But these are the types of, I think, narratives that are certainly important because they provide a perspective that often get lost in some of the super partisan, super political debate. And I don't know, and I think this is probably a space where we can have that conversation. I will say this for BC. In many cases, building EV infrastructure was a direct response to the increasing cost of internal combustion engine vehicles and the cost of operating those vehicles. It's turned into an economic winner. It's turned into something that has been incredibly useful for the province, for those of us that live in that province. The ease, the speed, and the cost efficiency of EV infrastructure, of driving EVs is a direct result of the infrastructure that's been built. So with that, Madam Chair, I hope we'll be able to get positive support for this motion. And I hope that we'll be able to have a meaningful conversation with our colleagues across, even those who think that somehow that advocating for this motion was a filibuster. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Noor Mohammed. Next I have is MP Deschamps-Terrien. Please go ahead.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et j'aimerais
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank my colleague for having tabled this motion today. We discuss positive examples of the implementation of electric vehicle infrastructure. And I think it's important that we focus on positive examples, what's worked well over the last 10 years, in order to be able to plan the next steps. Other investments are coming, and in order that this transition be a success, we need to plan, and it'd be good to take a look at some positive examples. Throughout the country, there are a number of very interesting projects that have a great deal of potential, and I'd like to take a step back so as to allow us to understand the context of this motion. Since 2016, in Canada, we've invested more than $1 billion to make charging infrastructure affordable and accessible for Canadians. And the investments that have been made over the last decade are supporting the establishment of a pan-Canadian charging network, and these charging stations are close to Canadians. These are infrastructure used during Canadians' travels if they're on vacations. So more than $1 billion have been spent, and this has allowed the installation of more than 30,000 charging stations for EVs across the country. These investments, that is to say, these 30,000 charging stations have been done through the Zero Infrastructure Vehicle Program from Natural Resources Canada, and in the future it'll be interesting to see what the successes of this program have been, what projects have worked well, what types of partnerships have been put into place. And so we would have at least 3 meetings to discuss these examples, and I'd like to hear from witnesses from municipalities, from provinces, from the private sector, all the various stakeholders who have worked on these projects that have been a success, and that will inform the future of things. And this is not an abstraction, because on the 5th of February, our government announced its new auto strategy, and in this strategy, there is a suite of measures to protect and consolidate the industry, and the sector needs to be based on the construction of the next generation of vehicles to support our competitiveness internationally. And within this strategy, the Government of Canada is making electromobility more attractive for Canadians by establishing a 5-year program for affordable electric vehicles and by improving charging infrastructure through investments of $1.5 billion, thanks to the charging initiative and from the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. So these investments will promote the purchase of electric vehicles in the country, and as part of our auto strategy, there will be investments to improve charging infrastructure, and these investments will be made over the next 5 years. And so, as parliamentarians, it will be a good idea for us to figure out what's worked well since 2016, and perhaps we could formulate recommendations that would allow us to better plan the future of things, to establish effective partnerships. And we've got a lot to learn in the federal government. And on the ground, it's municipalities, provinces, the private sector that help us implement these projects that have significant potential. And our auto strategy is based on what's been done up until now. A national strategy for charging infrastructure has been developed to promote the adoption of electric vehicles by using private sector investment. It's not only with federal funds that we'll be able to have charging infrastructure throughout the country. We also need to be able to attract private capital. And it will be important that we take a look at these things. What have the successes been? And if we take a look at what's been done since 2016, what has the federal government done? And which projects have allowed us to attract private capital? Because it's important that we not only have public funding, but also private funding. And this is the kind of thing that I'd like to see in the study recommended by my colleague. Recently, we announced a new investment of $84.4 million for charging infrastructure for zero emissions vehicles. And this $84.4 million will allow us to support 122 projects across the country, and it will allow the installation of up to 8,000 vehicle charging stations in Canada. So these are concrete projects, investments that we're making that will allow us to improve our charging infrastructure in the country. And if we take a look at these positive examples, I'm from Madawakaristigush.
Some witnesses are asking if they can leave. They have sent an email to the clerk. So what will be the will of the committee members? Should we let the witnesses go? MP Blanchet-Jonca?
Oui, ben, je demanderai que les témoins restent. Ils vont pouvoir voir.
I would ask for the witnesses to stay, and so they can watch the circus that's being done by the Liberals.
Can't decide based on one member. Like, what is the will of the majority of the committee members? Should we keep the witnesses until 5:30, or should we let them go? MP Mahal.
I agree with MP Blanchet-Jonca that the witnesses should also see what's going on, what the kind of filibustering is going on in the committee, and how important their testimony was.
Thank you. I just want to make a MPD Ritter. Yeah, thank you, MPD Ritter.
I think we shouldn't waste any more of their time because obviously a filibuster has been chosen to take place here instead of hearing testimony from our witnesses. So they might as well leave because they'll finish off what they have to say, and then it'll be the end of committee.
It seems that some members don't want them to leave, so we will have them until 5:30. MP Deschamps-Terrien, floor is yours.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not filibustering, I'm explaining why I think that my colleague's motion is a good idea. And my colleague from the bloc is someone who is able to do filibustering for an entire meeting. So don't worry, I'm not intending to speak as long as we saw our colleague do at other times. So I was mentioning the fact that in February, after the announcement of the auto strategy, it involved an investment of $84.4 million for the installation of more than 8,000 charging stations. And then, and this is where I'd gotten before the chair asked us about the witnesses, I represent a rural riding. And we know that in terms of charging infrastructure, the situation varies from one place to another in the country. there can be gaps between urban areas and rural areas. And given the study proposed by my colleague, it would be interesting to hear about what kind of successes we've seen in rural areas, because if we wanted to undertake this transition to electric vehicles, we need to be able to build our capacities in rural areas where we know that there are larger distances. So I'd like to hear about successful projects in rural areas in Canada. In the motion, my colleague mentions Quebec and BC. I'm from New Brunswick, so I'm going to get back to New Brunswick a little bit later, but I'd like to tell you about a few things in Quebec, which I find to be interesting, and which and my colleague mentions Quebec in the motion. We know that Quebec is at the forefront in Canada in terms of EVs. 42.7% of all electric vehicles in Canada are registered in the province next to the one we're in. So more than 420,000 electric or hybrid vehicles, which are already on Quebec's roads. And this number could reach 2 million by 2030. So thanks to its charging infrastructure, Quebec already is ahead of the game, and it will be interesting to hear about successes that could be inspirational for other projects in the country. More than 28,700 charging stations already available in the province, including ones at workplaces, and quite a few are rapid charging stations. And so more will probably have been added in the last little while. And if we're talking about an increase in the number of electric vehicles, what's essential that we bridge gaps in terms of charging infrastructure. Even if there has been progress made, there are still significant gaps. And so we've got work to do in order to continue the electrification of transportation, not only in that province, but throughout the country. And if we're talking about best practices, I'd like to tell you about something interesting announced in March 2026 in Quebec. The Quebec government announced a regulatory project to amend the building code in order to make sure that buildings would be able to have more charging stations, especially in multifamily housing units throughout the province. And through this new regulation, there is a requirement to have 100% charging stations at these new building projects. So this is something that could enlighten our work. And if we take a look at what's being done in other provinces, for example, in mine, in New Brunswick, there are a number of positive examples that have been put into place over the last number of years. Since 2016, more than $2 billion has been invested, and we're going to continue these investments. It's had a very positive impact, and there is the program for zero emissions vehicles, and there's a $1.2 million project to create a rapid charging network in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. So for those of you who've never been to the Maritimes, we have long highways, and this project allowed us to choose 16 strategic locations in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia in order to ensure that people can get from one place to another and access rapid charging stations. I think, for example, of Saint Jean, which has put into place these infrastructure in order to accommodate a growing demand. And in November of 2025, an interesting announcement happened for Atlantic Canada, which can also inspire us. $10 million to promote the adoption of electric vehicles, including $9 million from the zero emissions infrastructure program. And so this $9 million will fund 2 projects, which will allow us to install more than 1,200 charging stations in various locations in Canada. There's also a project in New Brunswick, more than $2 million, that will allow us to install 240 charging stations for electric vehicles in public places, in parking lots, in workplaces, as well as light vehicle stations. So I'm going to stop there for today, but I'd like to continue debating this motion because I think there's a lot of potential, and there are many other examples that could be mentioned.
we are at 5:30, so and I have two people on the speakers list, and I'm having MP Blanchet Jonka also raising his hand for the speakers list. So I will ask the witnesses that if they would like to leave, they can leave. So thank you for appearing before the committee today. On behalf of all members, I would like to thank you. And if there is anything you would like to submit to the committee on this study, you can always send some written submissions. So that can be taken. So with that, thanks a lot and for coming. MP Blanchet Jonka.
Est-ce que c'est possible de prolonger la séance du comité?
Would it be possible to extend the committee so that we can ask some question to the witnesses? I mean, it would be nice. They came all the way here. We didn't have an opportunity for a second turn of questions. So is it possible to check on the resource and simply to extend the committee for our work as parliamentarians so we can ask questions for the study?
Yes,
I agree. I support my colleagues' suggestion if they'd like to stay.
Yeah, that's what I've asked the witnesses. If they have to submit something, they can always send a written submission. So it will be up to the members how they would like to proceed. So is it all right for them to leave, or they should?
Would you like to stay?
Are you available? Like, it depends upon the timings of the witnesses also, because they are pretty busy and they have taken out the time to come before the committee. MP Noor Mohammed?
Can we, would they be willing, if we gave additional questions, are they willing to give us written responses?
Are you available, or how's the...
I mean, I prefer the written response at time.
What about you, Madame Goldfeder? Are you...
I mean, it's already a gift of time, right? And so I think that it's a bit of an imposition, to be honest. But yes, if there's written questions and we can answer them, we'll answer them.
For MP Noor Mohammed, like, written questions are not usually sent. Like, if you, if they want to submit something, they can send it. Like, that will not be, we haven't done it, and that will not be possible. So, MP Baljanelli.
Madam Chair, you know, the witnesses have been gracious with their time, and I want to thank them for this opportunity for coming. I'm rather disappointed in the outcome of how this study is ending. I mean, the two witnesses here, we're talking about a level playing field and protecting the progress and not endangering it with regards to the North American EV manufacturers that currently exist and actually produce currently in North America, and particularly in Canada. General Motors is currently the largest EV. No, I've got the floor.
Point of order. Yes, MP Tishanshavia.
Are we on the motions?
So MP Baljanelli was next on the list, on the speaking list. So
Yes,
yes.
I currently am. Because my colleague indicated that in his view, that not enough had been spoken with regards to what had been taking place in the North American auto manufacturing sector. This study, if I can read it back into the record, this study says that it was to look at the new agreement.
Sorry for
with,
interrupting, MP Baljanelli. Can I just, because the
Yes,
witnesses
if
were
the
about to leave,
witnesses, yes.
so if we can go back to the witnesses. So thank you once again, and if you want, you can leave the meeting.
Rappel au règlement, Madame la Présidente.
If they'd like to listen, I'm going to be going for a couple of minutes.
Point of order.
Oui.
Jonka?
Est-ce que vous pouvez vérifier avec les témoins si les témoins...
Could you please check with the witnesses if some of them can stay, so maybe we can ask them questions? I know some of them have to leave, but maybe some of them can stay, and then maybe we can ask them questions.
Be up to the members if they want to stay, because I don't know how long it will go, because I have few people on the speaking list. So it is entirely up to the witnesses. If you would like to stay and listen, and we might not come back to questions, we might come back. So right now, I don't know. So I will leave it to the witnesses. If they want to leave, they can leave it. If they want to stay, they can stay it. Thank you. No, because I have a speaking list, so I'm not sure how long will that go, because I cannot give you any idea on the timing. So that's how, because we can only go for a vote on this motion once the debate has collapsed. So we will, until I have a speaking list, we will have to continue. Okay? Thank you. Yes.
Madam Chair, again, I want to express my disappointment with regards to the tactics that have been utilized this afternoon by my Liberal colleagues. Again, we were listening to representatives of the major manufacturers that currently are employing thousands of Canadians here in the automotive sector and in the EV sector. And they talked about the need for a level playing field to protect the progress, not endanger it with regards to EVs. And why they're here today is because we're looking under this study that is, we're currently studying the new agreement with the People's Republic of China, which permits up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles to enter the Canadian market. The Standing Committee on Science and Research undertake a study of no fewer than 4 meetings to examine the scientific, research, and industry implications of the agreement on Canada's electric vehicle sector, and the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House. We have 2 witnesses here who have used the words in their presentation about the need for a level playing field, about the need to protect the progress and not endanger it. What we've done here, ladies and gentlemen, is that we've got 600,000 people work in the automotive sector here in Canada. That's an insult. Today's insult is an insult to those 1,200 workers at GM in Ingersoll, the 500 in Oshawa that lost their jobs, and those hundreds of workers in St. Catharines at the powertrain division that have yet to be called back because General Motors was going to put an EV battery plant in St. Catharines, which was put on hold because of the low demand with regards to the EV market that exists. Again, the major manufacturers have written off in this year alone almost $70 billion when it comes to their EV investments. Let that sink in for a moment. The federal government only invested up to $50 billion, or promised to invest $50 billion into that segment. The EV market is one we want to nurture, not cede it to an outside player that does not share our values. And I say that word values, because that's, in essence, what we would be doing by allowing 49,000 Chinese EVs into this country, growing by 6% ad infinitum, because there's no limit on that growth every year, ladies and gentlemen, no growth. And again, I say what we've done is seeded it for a 1-year deal on canola. Well, bravo to this government. So, Honda and Toyota, for example, Toyota is the largest.
I wanted to make sure that my friend had the clip that he needed before I called my point of order, but I'm still going. We're on the motion. We are now on the motion.
I'm getting
so
to that.
I'm failing to understand how this is relevant to the motion.
Well, no, I'll get to that, Madam Chair, because I'm getting.
Keep it relevant to the motion.
I'm getting back.
The motion.
I'm getting back to that because
proposed by MP Noor Mohammed, MP Baldwinelli has.
Yeah, well, I'm getting back to that because he mentioned that he raised his motion because of what we are studying here. And I'm fine with, I'd like to propose some changes to that. And I think we could have a great study with regards to what my colleague is proposing. I don't think we just have to limit it to what's going on in Quebec and British Columbia. I'd like to see what's going on in Ontario. If you remember, the Independent Electricity System Operator wrote a report in December of 2023 to get Ontario to a fully green grid by 2050. That's going to cost $400 billion, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to need 6 times the 14,000 workers that currently exist. That's going to take us from the, 44,000 megawatts to 82,000 megawatts. So that's something that we need to consider. Do we have the infrastructure in place? Do we even have the electrical generating capacity to even get there? But you know what? Let's study that. Let's look at that. Let's look at the examples that we can have. But at the same time, let's recognize we have current auto production that's taking place that we want to nurture. The RAV4 is the largest selling hybrid in, is it and not only in Canada, but I think within North America. And you know what? That's produced here. Let's nurture that. Well, if you look at the EV strategy, the rebate doesn't even go fully to the hybrids. It only goes to EVs. So why are we precluding hybrid electric? Why are we doing that? Ultimately, it should be the consumer that is deciding the vehicle that it wants, not this federal government. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to propose that I'd like to see that we move forward with my colleague's motion. I'd like to ask that we remove the word just positive examples and that we open it up to lessons learned throughout this country, and that we accept it on the condition that it doesn't preclude our schedule that is currently examined. And then we table this, and when we have an opportunity to do so, we'll do so. But I think what we've done this afternoon is just totally disrespectful, not only to the witnesses, because they have an excellent story to tell. They have an EV product that they want to grow in North America. And so what we've done is not provided them with that opportunity to tell their story, to tell this committee the threats that were being put in place by the current agreement that this government has for allowing Chinese EVs. They're not going to establish manufacturing capacity in this country. These knockdown kits are hundreds of jobs. They're not a supply chain. We're not going to get the value added on the technology. When BYD was in Brazil, it got shut down. The construction got shut down for human rights violations. It got shut down in Hungary for human rights violations. Are these the people that you want to be doing business with?
Sorry for interrupting, MP Baldinelli. If you can keep the remarks related to this motion, please.
So, again, I'm just going to come down with my comments on this. That I would like to make an edit to the motion that's before us and say this, that the committee conduct a study of no less than 3 meetings on examples of EV infrastructure implementation with specific references to lessons that have been learned throughout the country.
We have an amendment on the floor. Any debate on the amendment? MP Noor Mohammed?
I think it's a good amendment. I would certainly be pleased to support it. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, so is everyone in support of the amendment? Please raise your hand if everyone is in support of the amendment. Okay, so I think we have the unanimous consent for this amendment. So this amendment is adopted. So now we have the motion as amended. And I have MP Suds and on the list, and MP Blanchet-Jonca. MP Suds. So we have the motion as amended.
I'm fine to go to a vote.
Okay. MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Écoutez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an entire circus that we just had in this afternoon. We can see the arrogant attitude of this majority government with all those floor crossers. Okay, this motion, I find it very interesting, but what I find particular is the complete lack of coherence in the speech of this government. So we want to talk about energetic transition as a very important issue, which means we want to reduce the number of vehicles that use gas on the road. But on the other side, we want to fund with public money those gas vehicles with, for example, subsidies and oil pipeline. Let's remember Trans Mountain, $34 billion. My colleague was talking about a $1 billion investment, but like $34 billion. I mean, you don't need a doctorate in mathematics or in quantum physics to understand that $34 billion is a lot more than $1 billion. And then he's giving us a grocery list. But once again, what are we expecting for the government later? Well, the Minister of Natural Resources promised another $10 billion for a pipeline all the way to BC. and we're being told, okay, it's very important. We're going to do a study on the energy transition toward EV and see the positive effects. And Madam Chair, I certainly agree with this study, but once again, the government needs to explain, because as we say in Quebec, when your feet are not following your mouth, we have a government which cannot reach its objective when it comes to GHS gas. And yet we are investing again in industries that are generating those emissions the most. So there's certainly a lack of logic here. And there's something that was particularly striking in this committee, since its beginning in 2021. It is, of course, the lack of logic between the words and the acts of the government. But what's been particularly striking, and in my opinion, which summarize the acts of the government, is when the chief scientific officer, she's not exactly no one, she's paid for this, and she told us about a project that the government is really spending a lot of energy on, if we can say that. She said it's a national interest program, and she said that she was not even consulted for scientific advice. So I really hope that here the government is going to, listen to the chief scientific officer. Let's remember she had qualifications here. She saw that the government was going around most of the act, particularly the criminal code, when it came to national interest project. So I am surprised. This government has a lot of statements, but the problem is that the actions are lacking to reach those objectives that they had stated in the past. So once again, I think that it was really too bad that we weren't able to ask questions of the witnesses that were here. So I'm going to support this motion. And once again, I hope this government will be able to ensure that the confidence of the population is taken into account. Colleagues have mentioned a bit earlier, and I'm going to say here very proudly, it is in Quebec that you have the most EVs, and it is because there were political choices that were made. There was a political will. We didn't wait for the federal government to have all kind of announcements and subsidies. And the other thing that follows is that now we're being told, okay, now it's important to see the positive effects of EVs or the implementation of new infrastructure. But it is this same government who, a little more than a year ago, suspended subsidies for EVs. So how come it wasn't good last year? So it was paused. They completely stopped, Madam Chair, because of the political pressure that they felt, and suddenly it's back in place an hour and a half later. Imagine all the impacts, and I'm really looking forward to discuss that. All these impacts on the supply chain, on the population, but also the absolutely contrary signals that it was sent. If the subsidy was good, why didn't keep it? They reintroduced it a year and a half later. So you see, Madam Chair, it is the kind of action that makes it so that the population doesn't trust anymore, because what they say doesn't match what they do. So, Madam Chair, I was in a chamber in the House this morning, and we were talking about Bill M9, where we're talking about changing the composition of the committee. So today is the last day where we will have a real representation of the will of the population, with minority people being represented. But the government represents now 51% of the MLA, of the MPs. And now they're going to take the right to be represented at 58% in the committee. This is what you call a supermajority. So I think the next few weeks, next few months are going to bring in a new type of government. And I'm going to say that what's kind of scary is that it does not respect the will of the population. And it is the same thing about vehicle electric.
Motion, the one which we are debating. So,
Avec
please.
grand plaisir. Alors, question.
Yes, with pleasure. So the idea that there should be some kind of coherence between the action of the government and the will of the population. One person out of 3 in Canada does not trust trust the government, which means 2/3 do not trust democratic institutions. And this was just published by Statistique Canada. It's not an invention of the Bloc Québécois. And I am afraid that it is this type of action.
Je comprends, Madame la Présidente, vous n'aimez pas ça que je dise que seulement un Canadien sur 3 croit au Parlement.
I know that you do not like the fact that I'm saying that 2 out of 3 Canadians don't believe Parliament. Okay, it's maybe not part of this motion, but there is a link with the motion that was presented by the Liberals and the lack of coherence with the action that this government has been taking. So certainly, I'm going to be able to put an end to this debate. Maybe we can move on to the vote. And I would like to have some time to do what we had planned today, which is to ask questions on the topic of our studies to the witnesses who took the time to be here with us.
Thank you. And seeing no other person wanting to speak, we will go for a vote on the motion, motion of MP Noor Mohammed as amended by MP Baldinelli. So I will ask the clerk to please take the vote.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Oui.
Ms. Suds.
Yes.
Monsieur Deschamps-Thériault.
Oui.
Mr. Rana.
Yes.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Yes.
Mr. Ritter.
Yes.
Mr. Mahal.
Yes.
Mr. Holman.
Yes.
Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca.
Oui.
Okay, so the motion as amended is adopted. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting?
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt.
Yes, MP Holman.
As I'm sitting in for MP Vincent Ho, I'd like to move his motion that was put on notice on Friday, April 24th.
You can move it.
So the motion is that persistent to Standing Order 108-3I, the committee undertake a study of the Government of Canada's $200 million agreement concerning Spaceport, Nova Scotia, near Kansas, Nova Scotia, and its implications for Canada's space sector, science policy, research capacity, and innovation ecosystem. Further, that the study examines the cost, procurement, process, value for money, readiness of the facility, expected scientific and research benefits, expected use by federal departments and agencies, and risk to taxpayers. That the committee hold no fewer than 4 meetings. That the committee invite the President of the Canadian Space Agency, the Chief Science Officer of Canada, officials from Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, officials from the Department of National Defence, representatives of Maritime Launch Services, and any other witnesses the committee deems relevant. That the committee order the production of all contracts, briefing notes, value for money, assessments, procurement records, scientific or research assessments, correspondence, and related documents concerning the agreement within 30 days, and that the committee report its findings to the House. To my knowledge, this motion has been submitted in English and French. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Holman. MP Noor Mohammed.
Madam Chair, I was going to suggest 2 things. One is, I think we're all happy to debate the motion, have discussion on it. I was going to suggest, one, that we suspend to discuss amongst ourselves, but the other is to perhaps suspend the meeting and we can pick this up on Thursday when we have the proper time to be able to engage in the conversation, because I do think this is a good conversation to have. I think we've all got questions. So.
Okay, so is everyone okay to suspend the meeting and then resume it back on Thursday?
That's end of day Thursday.
Is everyone okay from your side to MP Blanchet-Jonca?
Madame la Présidente, pouvez-vous m'expliquer un peu qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Madam Chair, could you explain what's going on? There was a motion that was tabled and approved, and so instead of continuing with the committee meeting, given that the witnesses are still here, another motion has been tabled, and so that's not the way things normally go.
See, we voted on a motion, and now MP Holman has moved a motion, and it is in order because he is subbing in for MP Ho, and this motion was put up on notice on Friday. So 48 hours have passed, and he can. So now what we have is motion moved by MP Holman on the floor. Some members are suggesting that we should. Just let me complete. Some members are suggesting that we should suspend the meeting. Is it the will of the committee members to suspend it and resume it back on Thursday? No?
Rappel au règlement, Madame la Présidente.
MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Oui, écoutez, là, ça fait 2 fois que vous faites ça.
So you've done this twice. in a row. On the 23rd of April, you took our speaking time away from us, and this is a breach of parliamentary privilege. You planned 2 months worth of meetings at the last minute, and you didn't consult us. That is not teamwork. It's not collaboration, okay? And so I'd like to really focus on this today. And now twice you've done this. You want to suspend the committee meeting. You want to adjourn the committee, like as though you're not interested in continuing with the committee's work. And there are witnesses here with us.
This is what Mr. Blanchard is saying is entirely out of order and basically, I think, violates the decorum of the committee and the attacks on the chair. And I think that there's a limit to this.
Thank you, MP Noor Mohammed. And I would like to let MP Blanchet-Jonca know that it's not me. The members of the committee have every right to move a motion. And they, as long as that motion is in order, the members can do it. It's not like I'm not taking away your time. Two members have moved different motions, and then we have to go through the process. We have to go through the debate, and we cannot go for a vote until we have the debate. So MP Holman has moved the motion. We have the motion on the floor, and MP Holman wants to continue with the debate on this motion. I will ask the members, I will suspend the meeting for a few minutes so that members can have a look at the motion which has been moved by MP Holman. Meeting is suspended. Okay, we have a list. MP de Ontario. The floor is with MP Holman. Yes, okay. MP Holman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we go to vote with regards to the motion I set forward on behalf of MP Vincent Ho?
The speaking list, we cannot get on to the vote. We have MP De Ridder and then MP Blanchet-Jonca. Okay. Okay.
I don't need to speak.
Okay, MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Pouvez-vous juste m'expliquer sur la façon...
Can you explain the way that things are supposed to work? This is the first time I've seen what's going on in my 6 years as a parliamentarian. There was a motion when the Liberal Party had the floor, and when the motion was carried, instead of continuing with giving people their speaking time, you gave the floor back to another member of the party to table another motion, and so you suspended the meeting, and now the witnesses are gone. So I'm trying to understand, why did we not adhere to people's speaking time when the motion was approved?
I've explained you before this suspension also that members have a right to move a motion. The motion was moved by MP Holman, which was in order, and I have people on the list, and we really have to suspend the meeting now, and we will come back to this on Thursday because the meeting is suspended. I'm the chair. I have people on the list. We are at 6 o'clock. The meeting is suspended, and we will come back to it on Thursday.
You don't have consensus to suspend the meeting.